Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Menners, and today my co host is a very special guest, the man who took 208 test wickets, one of the greatest leg spinners to play for Australia. I'm talking about Stuart MacGill. Stuart, welcome back to the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Menners, how are you? I'm very excited to be here.
Well, great to have you on. We had you on the podcast in 2017 for a fantastic
2017, 6 years. Wow.
Wow, it was just and we had a great interview. And since then, you've started your own podcast recently called Wickets with one of my favourites, Shane Lee, and Jack Sharp. How's that going?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool, actually. Ultimately, I think Jack will be the host.
Yes.
He's a magician. Literally, he's a magician.
He's Irish,
so
isn't he?
He's an Irish magician. His mum runs Irish cricket as well, so he's got a long cricket background. But Shane Lee, everybody knows Shane. But we kind of get along well, and we've known each other for a long time. Roomed together a bunch of times, but I think the three of us mix pretty well together. It's a slightly different format. We do 4-minute overs, so we do 4 or 5 4-minute overs, and that's it. And at the end of every over, the alarm goes off and change of subject. So we keep it nice and tight. And, look, it's pretty animated and a little bit crazy. But, it's good fun and gives me something to do on a Tuesday.
I've been enjoying it. I love you and Shane. And
I love you too.
And I love the quickness of the show.
Yeah.
I think some of the jokes need to be worked on.
Yeah,
I think you need a new joke writer. But it's actually great to hear you talking about cricket because, unfortunately, we haven't been able to hear you talk about cricket for a long time. And you're happy to be back doing that.
I think cricket's something that, realistically speaking, it's the only thing I've ever really been good at. So talking about cricket's sort of next best thing. I'd much rather be playing cricket, but
those days are gone.
Those days are long gone. You probably see me trying to get out of this armchair as I leave. But talking about cricket, something that I know a lot about it. The three of us know a lot about it. Well, the four of us, if I include you. We know what we're talking about, and I think every single cricket player has a slightly different point of view. And so it's always something new. I don't think I ever get bored of listening to different people talk about things. It's when it's all the same that it kills me. That it actually does kill me. I don't like it when commentators or young blokes move into commentary and they feel the need to talk in a particular way. Whether or not they're trying to challenge Richie or, channel Richie, or use better language than they would normally in conversational terms. That annoys me. I like people who are just themselves, and it's like just sitting opposite a mate. That's what I like.
Excellent. And people might forget you had a stint on breakfast radio, so you are experienced behind the mic.
Hey, look, I've sort of floated around a bit. I've done a bit of TV, done a bit of radio. They're all different. Or I think you sort of touched on it at the beginning. I think sport is where I belong. At the end of the day, sportsmen and women who are talking about things outside of sport, you've got to remember that, I'm not a politician, I'm not a climate advocate, I'm not, but I look at those things and I live those things through the eyes of a sportsman. So as long as you temper everything by saying, well, look, he's just a cricket player, that's why he talks about politics like that. Well, I think that's a bit of fun, but I am a sportsman first and foremost.
Absolutely. Continuing the New South Wales tradition of loose spinners.
Loose spinners.
David Horn, Mo Matthews, Stephen O'Keefe.
There we go. Loose spinners. I'm as tight as they come in that group. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And so, listeners, go and subscribe to Wickets. I'll put the link in the episode notes.
Oh, great.
Because you can never have too many cricket podcasts to listen to.
Thank you very much, Menners. So it's on Spotify and Apple at the moment, and who knows, maybe we'll jump into your studio and we'll get some beautiful aesthetics on there one day.
Well, I used to I played at Mossman when Shane Lee was
there. We go.
And he was a coach of mine, and he was always super nice to me.
Cool.
His brother did end my cricket career because when I turned up at the Mossman nets one day and it was Brett Lee bowling with Jeff Thompson coaching him and bowling, and they go, "Hey mate, you go in there and face up." I realised maybe cricket's not for me at that point.
Look, he's finished more than one career, mate. Don't worry about that.
Now, with your last time we spoke, actually probably was 2018 because England had been here and you'd done some work with their young spinners.
Yeah.
Have you tried to keep in that loop of coaching young spinners, or is that not happening anymore?
No. I spend a lot of time coaching. I'm coaching the spin bowlers this year at Gordon Cricket Club.
Great.
So that's just starting this week. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's cool. Coaching a couple of young kids from around New South Wales as well. Couple from Wests, and but I'm a Gordon Cricket Club guy this year. It's quite good for me. It's a new cricket club for me. One of the few in New South Wales that I haven't been at, so that's pretty good. And I got some good mates there.
Great.
Matt Nicholson's there too, which is cool.
Matt Nicholson's
there too, yeah, which is great. And he and I played a test match together, which was cool.
I was actually watching those highlights last night of the 98-99 summer.
Yeah.
And it culminated in you taking, 5 for 57 and 7 for 50 at the SCG in that 5th test match. And after that is actually the first time we met because you were given a box for a one-day game.
Correct.
From Cricket Australia or Cricket New South Wales?
From the SCG Trust.
And you had some mates there, and I was at the match with Tim Farriss.
Yeah, right.
And you invited him up, and I tagged along.
Yeah, cool.
That was actually the first time we met. I saw the match before as well, where Nicholson made his debut.
Yeah.
And he was a Knox boy, and I went to Cranbrook, so we
There we go.
played against him.
I'm from Christchurch Grammar School.
Christchurch Grammar School. Another bloke that was too quick for me, and Matt Nicholson.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad you're back in coaching because hearing you talk about leg spin is so fascinating.
Well, look, as I said, it's something that I know I was good at. It's probably the only thing I've been good at, and I wasn't a natural. So I grew up. My dad was a leg spin bowler. Very different to me though. He was very, very accurate, and I probably worked on the big wicket takers rather than the dots in between. But Dad played 25 years of first grade cricket. Coached and everything. So I had him always in the background helping me out, telling me what to do, how he understood things. But because I wasn't a natural, I found that I had to coach myself all the way through. And also there were lots of bad days, When you do bowl, the occasional fully and the occasional half tracker, that could be 12 runs in and over. You tend to learn how to be quite resilient. And so look, when I'm talking to young spin bowlers, I know how they feel on a bad day, and conversely, I can teach them how to behave on a good day.
I mean, I can see here sitting across your big hands.
Yeah.
I can see where you used to get that prodigious turn from.
Well, look, one thing that a lot of spin bowlers today, and even in the 70s, sort of forget is that playing cricket, and ultimately we want to play Test cricket, so playing cricket for 5 days is quite a physical task. And there's nothing wrong with getting in the gym, I was very, very surprised. A lot of people think spin bowlers, weight training, I think that's just rubbish. I was very surprised to see how slight Todd Murphy was. My son reminded me that, Todd's still only 20 years old, so he's only a kid. But, I'd love to see him get a bit of bulk about him. I did a lot of weight training when I was younger. Some couple of stages during the Cricket Academy and stuff like that, I'd get in the gym 6 days a week. So, I think that did help me out as times went on, because it's not just about bowling 30 overs today. It's about bowling 30 overs tomorrow morning if you need to as well. You have to be able to bowl 2 days in a row, and then you have to be able to bowl on the 5th day. So, the workload that is required is quite significant as a spin bowler. I always felt to myself, if I bowl half the overs, I might be a chance of getting half the wickets. But you've got to be able to be strong enough to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Last week I had on the show Kumar Sangakkara
cool.
dialed in, and we were talking about some of his matches and playing against Australia, and he mentioned how good you were on the tour of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, Sri Lanka, yeah.
He said, how difficult you were to face, which is a pretty big compliment for someone that averaged almost 60 in Test cricket.
Yeah, he was pretty cool saying it. And also he's a really good guy too. We spent quite a lot of time together up in, he toured Darwin and Cairns. I didn't play, I was 12th man, but We went out for dinner a couple of times. He's had me to his house in Colombo. He's a very, very good guy. And I did bowl quite well in that tour of Sri Lanka. And unfortunately, when I got injured, 2007-ish, just before Christmas, we were playing Sri Lanka too, and he got me in Hobart. But I'd like to say that it's because I was injured. I couldn't feel the ball.
He got a few plays with that 30-odd Test centuries he scored, 38.
Yeah, he got a few players. He was, the left-handers like to think that they can get a right-arm wrist spinner, but I actually quite enjoyed bowling to left-handers. They have to play every single ball that you bowl to them, whereas a right-hander, when you turn the ball quite a lot, they can let a few go. If you get your lines right to a left-hander hitting the top of off stump, it can get quite interesting. And, but he was certainly a very challenging player. And his stats, don't forget, keeping as well for a lot of it.
Incredible.
So it is incredible. He is a great bloke, good player, and great bloke, great player, but also very good commentary as well. I think, I enjoyed having him around.
Yeah, well, he said some nice things about you.
Well, he gets big hugs from me back.
I'll send them back.
Yeah.
All right, now I want to get into some news stuff, Stewie. Now that you're back on your podcast, Wickets, we can get to some current issues, and then I want to reminisce a bit about some of the great memories of your playing career.
You're the only one here who can remember them, so you'll have to walk me through them.
Well, let's get into the news. So since the last Cricket Unfiltered, Australia have announced their T20 squad for the Tour of South Africa. I think they play 3 T20s, then 5 one-dayers, and then they head to India for the World Cup, and they've got 3 ODIs there.
So that must be starting pretty soon then, mustn't it?
End of the month, I think last day of August. So they've named Mitch Marsh as
captain.
What do you think of that decision?
Look, the only thing I'll say about that is that, I mean, he's done it before from what I can remember. And I love. Look, I'll say nice things first. I love the way he bowls.
Yep.
In the Australian team, and right across, and we've got one of the greatest, fast bowling lineups. I would say, arguably of all time. I'm very critical of their seam position. I think it's probably been a little bit lazy. We talk a lot about cross seam now and scrambled seam.
Well, there's this wobble seam.
It's bullshit. Absolute crap as far as I'm concerned. If you try and get the seam up all the time, then sometimes you'll get it wrong and then there'll be a wobbled seam.
Yeah.
You don't. I think that people who bowl wobbled seam 95% of the time are lazy. And I will include all of us fast bowlers in that. Mitch Marsh, on the other hand, seem beautifully upright and bowls nice outswingers to a right-handed batsman.
I think when Stark's bowling well, he has good seam position.
When he's bowling well, he does.
Yeah.
Don't go telling me that this wobbled seam is a deliberate play. And if it is deliberate, lift your game because it's wrong.
Interesting.
Mate, all you need to do is look at Wokesy in the England setup. Our boys, the second it started swinging both ways, can't play it. He won England those last 2 Test matches.
Definitely.
Because he could swing the ball both ways. And it's just because of his seam presentation. I think that it's something that right back until 2005, Australia got blown away by England holding the seam upright and making the ball swing both ways. And I just think that it's something that we need to be very careful of, because if young quick bowlers coming through think that wobbled seam is a thing, whereas it's just lazy. If you're deliberately wobbling the seam every ball, prove to me that you can keep it up. You can't.
So is your problem with it that
it's lazy? That's my problem with it.
But also, it takes swing out of the game. And
it does. They're trying to say that it's inconsistent off the pitch, which is why they like the wobble seam. The thing is that a perfectly pitched outswinger or leg spinner or wrong or in swinger, they've got to play them as well. I mean, I hear some kids talk about scrambled seam for spin bowling too. It's good for a variation. It's not what you want to do all the time. You want to hit the seam. The reason the seam is such a powerful force, and the reason the ball made such a big impact in that last Test match in England for Wokes, is because when they brought the ball back, there's been a lot of talk about the shine on the ball on the second ball when it was replaced. I looked straight at the seam. The seam was white, brand new, compared to something that had been blown out and looked like the dog had had it in its mouth. That seam meant that every time he hit the seam, it does something quicker. And that's what you want. You want the batsman to be out if he's made a mistake. You don't want it to bounce 3 times before it gets to the slips.
Absolutely. And I guess when you hit the seam, you people say wobble seam's inconsistent. So is hitting the seam.
Hitting the seam.
You're not sure which way it's going to go.
We're not playing on a hard court, on a tennis hard court. We're playing on grass. Okay? Make sure that you hit the seam more often than not, and you'll take plenty of wickets.
I think one of the problems then is Pat Cummins is the biggest exponent of wobbled seam in Australian cricket. He's our captain. He's averaging about 20 odd.
He's a great bowler. Imagine if he bowled an outswinger and in-swinger at will.
Interesting. So, but Mitch Marsh is skipper.
Mitch Marsh is skipper. So that's it with the ball. We've seen in that Ashes series that he can win it with a bat as well. I think the reason I like his batting is because of the conviction that he has in his strokes. When he's batting well, he sees the ball, he knows where he wants it to go, and he just believes it's going to go there. From there, you can make mistakes, and people do, and I don't have a problem with that. But it's the initial decision making that I think is really, really strong with him. And look, I think I'm quite cool with him being captain. I guess being a genuine all-rounder and captain might be a tough gig, but it's not Test cricket. It's limited overs cricket, and the 20 overs, you don't really have to concentrate for huge periods of time. And so I think it's probably a good way to get him into it. Who knows? They might be sort of eyeing him for a Test job further down the track because our bowlers are getting a little bit older. I think the youngest bowler we had was, apart from Todd, was 29 years old. That's in that, right. Which is quite a big deal.
And also he's very popular, Mitch Marsh.
He's very popular, and he's West Australian, and West Australians like getting behind, their own guys too. So, to be a very, very popular, he'd be very famous in Perth at the moment.
Definitely. Another feature of this Australian T20 squad is George Bailey, the selector, said Steve Smith will open the batting in this T20 side. And whilst I think this is a very good decision, it's a year too late. George Bailey should have made this decision ahead of the T20 World Cup last year when Aaron Finch couldn't hit the ball off the square. But I do think, and I've always thought for a long time, Smith's best position in limited over cricket, it is the top of the order because he's not a big hitter, so he can hit through the field and over the infield while the field's up. And then when they spread the field, he's adept at
moving the ball around. Yeah.
And then the big hitters can come in.
And he runs well between the wickets, so his ones are twos, which is a big deal. And I think you're right about George. I'm not a huge George Bailey fan, but I don't mind people rectifying mistakes either. Yeah. And you pick your best team at any given time, and when we're going into a tournament, that we hope to win this tournament. And I think that if Steve Smith's at the top of the order, it solves a lot of problems for us. And I think he belongs there. And I as I said, I'm not a huge Georgie fan, but good on him for making that choice.
Definitely. Another one included in the T20 squad is Spencer Johnson, who is absolutely one to watch. Have you seen him bowl?
No.
He's very quick, left arm, swings the ball. They call him Spojo. Yeah. He's going to play Test cricket for Australia very soon.
You
27. 27. So I think they're keen to get him in while he's at the top of his game. That's sort of the main thing with the T20 squad. The only interesting thing, a little bit of sort of, I guess, a changing of the circumstances is Daniel Sams, the Australian and New South Wales player, has actually opted out of this tour because of the economic consequences of going to play for Australia. He's playing at the 100 at the moment. He just played in the Blast. He's probably going off to another T20 competition after that. That's unheard of for a player to knock back an Aussie tour.
Look, I think you'd probably find that, Daniel's sort of proven to himself that he can do it. So now it's just all about, for him, because once you've proven that you can, achieve at a certain level, then, to a large degree, your goals sort of change. And unless you've got sort of long-term goals and wicket marks and run marks, which I guess you probably wouldn't have so much in short-form cricket, maybe money is what it's all about. I do know that there are so many tournaments on offer for these guys now that, the choices are pretty limitless, to be honest. I think you'll probably see it happening a little bit more often. If his heart's not in it, I don't really want him anyway.
I get that. And also, if George Bailey's and the selectors are saying, well, we got you in this squad, but realistically, you're not going to make the World Cup. Realistically, Berendorf, Spencer Johnson, Stark are all ahead of you as left-arm quicks, and there's probably a few all-rounders ahead of you.
He's a bit more of he's I would call him, more of a utility player.
Yeah. He's a big hitter.
He does a lot of work with the bat as well. But I think, having watched him play in, T20 games around the world in different competitions now, I think that sometimes having somebody like him coming in towards the end is, incredibly valuable. But if you've got the same traditional mix of, a bunch of good bowlers and a bunch of good batsmen, then you might not, arguably you wouldn't need him.
Yeah.
So, I think he would be in my squad. But I don't think I'd start with him.
Yeah. And look, he's around 30 now, so I actually don't criticize him.
I don't have a problem with somebody earning a living.
Absolutely. And he's given everything he can to New South Wales and Australia whenever he could. Other one to watch in that T20 squad is Aaron Hardy, the WA all-rounder. Keep an eye out for him. Now, the 50-over squad. Now, they've also announced a sort of preliminary World Cup squad. The big exclusion, and this kind of surprises me, is no Marnus Labuschagne.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? So Marnus went over to England, being one of our sort of, wonder twins, he and Smithy. Didn't work out for him, and then all of a sudden, he's out of the one-day squad as well. I wonder whether that would have happened if he'd made 300 or 400s in England. His 50-over form is actually pretty average, to be honest. He's not a great player when he's got to force, himself to get off strike. He's good at dominating attacks, but as we saw when he was batting with Usman in that last test, he can get stuck. And I think that innings, more than anything else, probably played a big role in his non-selection in this 50-over team. He'll be spewing. There's no doubt about it, and he'll be trying everything that he can to work that out, because he won't have given up on 50-over cricket, I wouldn't have thought.
I do think as well he and Steve Smith are quite similar in the role they can play in the 50-over game.
Maybe, yeah.
And probably wasn't room for both of them. But you're right, the fact that he didn't have a great tour of India, the fact that he didn't have a great tour of England, the fact that the World Cup's in India, maybe they have gone for a lot of all-rounders. I mean, there's Stoinis, Glenn Maxwell, Mitchell Marsh, Aaron Hardy, and Cameron Green.
So all of those guys, I think the big thing with all of those guys is that they can find a boundary very easily.
Exactly.
And we know that the grounds in India are not massive. They can all, if they're ever bogged down, I mean, Stoinis just needs to sort of look at a bicep and the ball's over the...
Did you see him getting caught in New York by that photographer?
I didn't see that.
He was walking along with his partner in New York, and there's this sort of street photographer that captures people just when they're wandering past. And he had no idea who Stoinis was, and he grabbed him and his very pretty partner for some photos in New York. And then all of a sudden he posted it, and there was like 1 million Indians saying, that's one of the most famous cricketers in the world.
Well, look, he's a good-looking rooster. He's well-educated.
Yes.
He's a good guy.
WA boy.
Yeah, he is. I'm pretty sure he was Hale School. So, but he's a good guy, and he's a great cricket player. So
anyway, he can find the boundary.
He can find a boundary, overs. And he can find a photographer as well, by the sounds of things.
And the photographer saw his girlfriend.
Trust me, he'd have found him.
Yeah.
But the roles, they'd have been walking up and down the street for ages
waiting
before
for the photo. Well, he did do a couple of pretty good poses, so you're right. And then the spinners, and this is interesting. World Cup in India, they will need spinners. They've got Ashton Agar, Adam Zampa, and they've included Tanvir Sanger. Have you seen much of
Yeah.
Sanger?
Yeah, I've watched him bowl.
What do you think?
I haven't met him. I've watched him bowl. Look, he's I know Stephen O'Keefe thinks that he's got the goods. He makes the ball when he gets it right, it turns enough, plenty. And also the thing that's quite good is he gets some good bounce. So when you are trying your hardest to get over the top of the ball and make it, make it really talk, quite often you will drag it down a touch, or it might be a touch flatter. And so the batsmen think that the offsides open up. And if you do have lots of revolutions on it, it can bounce a bit more. And you quite often get catches at short backward point or cover point. And he does that. So, look, I think he's well worth a look. It's interesting that they're taking him to India. I mean, they never really seemed all that keen to take me to India because they said you've got to bowl straight at the stumps. So,
Really?
it's, obviously things have changed, which I applaud because I think that's right. I think Adam Zampa's sort of proven over the last 5 years that he's the best option in short form cricket, whether it's 50 or 20 overs. He does attack the stumps, and he's also made that a big feature of his game in all formats. And I think that he knows what he's doing. He doesn't get spooked by batsmen having a go at him. He's got plenty of variation, and I think he'll probably be the backbone of that team. I don't really. I mean, Ashton Agar's a lovely bloke, but I don't know how long we can keep persevering with him.
Yeah, he really struggled. They couldn't pick him in India because of his form. So yeah, we'll see though.
I think it's just a curious selection.
Curious selection.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't look at Todd Murphy. I mean, I do know, but because he's not batting, but he also proved that he can hold a stick in England. So I just don't know what Ashton Agar.
Sometimes I feel like the selectors or the system feels like they've invested so much time in someone like Ashton that they can't then go, okay, actually, maybe he needs a long spell.
Look, well, he had a long spell. To be fair to him, he worked his way back into things, into the mix. But I think when you have invested such a long time in somebody and they haven't paid off, you got to cut and run. As we said, with Stephen Smith's selection, George Bailey's rectified that mistake. I mean, I think he had an opportunity to rectify the mistakes that a number of selectors have made with Ashton Agar by not selecting him. But, as I said, he's a lovely kid. Good on him. And I hope that he does get an opportunity over there and puts a lot of the bad vibes to rest from India last time because,
his white ball form is very different to his red ball form.
Yeah, but to be honest, mate, cricketers know, deep down, cricketers know that it's bat and ball. So if 5 minutes with a good sports psychologist should put that to bed.
I agree with you. He's got a lot. He's got a lot to prove, and this sort of looks at the.
With that little phrase, a lot to prove. I think that if I was to give him any advice at all, it would be to go over there and not try and prove anything.
Yeah.
Just go over there and try and bowl your best ball.
Have some fun.
That'll work out for him a lot better than if he's got the weight of actually performing and then trying to prove himself to people like, you and me. I mean, that's a silly thing to do. He should just put it all aside, and I'm sure he will, and just bowl his best ball, and then, we'll see how he goes.
Definitely. I mean, the Agar brothers are two of the nicest people.
Yeah, they're good guys.
Australian cricket. They've both been on this podcast.
Keep going back to Perth, don't we?
Yeah. All right, a couple more on the one-day squad. David Warner.
Yep.
Should he still be playing for Australia, Stu?
Look, at the beginning of the Ashes tour, I would have said no. I think that he's made it quite clear that he wants to finish up in Sydney, so play, right through. I think these one-day games are an opportunity for him to do just that. He just hung in there. I would have played him in the 4th and 5th tests in England, having started that series.
Yeah.
Just because we only needed to draw, and the setup of the team would have changed a lot. He bats well with Uzi.
Maybe they don't change that ball in that final test. He gets 150 not out.
He would have, for sure. Exactly right. But these, I felt right from the start that these one day, the T20s and the 50 over World Cup, they're what's going to get him a start this test summer. I know that everybody still says red ball and white ball, but I think that's rubbish. He's gonna, if he dominates in the 50 over World Cup, we're going to keep him going. There's no doubt about that. So at the moment, he's in my team, but that's changed from the beginning of the Ashes.
Interesting. So you wouldn't have picked him originally?
I wouldn't have picked him. I probably would have. I'd have played him in the Test World Championship game, and if he failed in that, he wouldn't have played in the Ashes.
Would you have gone for like a Harris or
probably? Yeah.
Last issue with the 50 over World Cup squad, and this will actually turn into us just laying into George Bailey. So he announced Pat Cummins as 50 over skipper. I think it was late last year, heading into the summer, and he was asked in the press conference by one of the News Limited journalists, do you think that by picking a fast bowling captain, it kind of limits your selection possibilities? Because they're playing the 50 over World Cup in India. You might only want one quick bowler, a couple of spinners, a couple of all-rounders. You might not need two quick bowlers. So that would mean, you're going to play Cummins over Stark in a 50 over game? Probably not. And Bailey was asked this question and said, I haven't thought that far ahead. Now, I think he was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it does concern me that you're not thinking that tactically, specifically, because look at this squad. When we go to India, we might not need Cummins. Stark is a better 50 over bowler, no question. Absolutely no question. Probably the best all time if you look at his record. Then you've got Hazelwood, who's absolutely killed it in the IPL, bowling on those wickets. So that means Cummins, there might not be a spot for him. Look, and he's your captain.
Yeah, look, I guess you and I probably slightly differ on this one. My feeling is that if you've got all these all-rounders that you've got at your disposal, then I would be inclined to take in at least two proper quicks.
Yeah.
I would never be playing, one specialist fast bowler because I've got all-rounders in the team. I'd do it the other way round. I'd say, well, that means they can all bat.
Yeah.
So that if they can all bat, and, Mitchell Marsh and Stoinis and Max, they can all bat. So make them bat, make them take up the bulk of the runs. I'd be more inclined to take in a specialist bowling lineup.
But is Cummins in that?
Yeah.
And that's the question.
Yeah,
what if he has a bad start to the tournament and you're dropping your captain three games into a World Cup?
That's okay. We've got Smith and we've got Mitchell Marsh. I'm not stressed about it.
I just think that why make that decision?
Well, look, I think what we like is we'd like a leader for all formats. If at all possible. It can't happen. I don't think the workload is a great thing in such, especially following such a condensed Ashes tour. And even going from South Africa into the World Cup, that's quite a big block of cricket too.
Absolutely.
I think the only issue I have is workload.
Right.
I'm not concerned about his place in the team, because, he's got a Test 100. He's arguably an all-rounder as well. So I just think that bowlers win games. That's why my podcast's called Wickets, mate.
Yep.
Wickets win games.
It's true.
Okay? And that's the same in one-day formats as well, as far as I'm concerned.
But it's true. I think the stats prove it. If you in T20 cricket, if you take 3 wickets in the power play, the stats prove it. You normally win the game.
Yeah. So that's my point. I just think let's concentrate on some good bowlers, not bits and pieces.
Yeah. I agree. I just think that it would have been a more stable option to have a Steve Smith as your captain for the World Cup, who's going to play every game, and you can pick the bowlers that are doing well.
Yeah, and then what if Stevie misses out a couple of games?
I know, but I think, I mean, you could pick that with anyone, but
Yeah, you could.
it's
You could, Manners.
you could, but I'd be more confident that for the team balance, you're going to pick Smith most of the time.
Okay.
All right, now that's the news. I want to just, before we end this news hit,
Yeah.
I just want to put the current system under the microscope a little
Okay.
bit. Firstly, which current players do you like to watch, Stu?
Well, I like Marcus Stoinis.
Yep, we've established that.
Yeah, and I reckon he's a great player. And I just, as I said about Mitchell Marsh, I really like players who are decisive. I don't mind mistakes, and somebody who does go all out is going to make mistakes sometimes. I mean, you can probably say that's what happened with me. I tried to rip the living, the cover off the ball every time I bowled it. Sometimes you're going to bowl a half tracker outside off stump. It's just the way it goes. I judge these guys on their good days, not their bad days. I think my favourite bowler, in the team is probably Josh Hazlewood. In any format, I really do like him.
Same. Friend of the show.
Yeah, look, I think he's great. Usman Khawaja is another favourite of mine. As a great bloke too.
And what do you think about Nathan Lyon's career? Because it is quite incredible what he's able to do.
I'm really bummed that he did his calf actually, because I see him with 700 wickets. To be honest, and he's not done yet.
No,
700 Test wickets. Obviously, he's not done yet. I think I know he likes playing one-day cricket and T20 cricket, but I would just get rid of it. If I were him, enjoy some time at home. And I know he's still got another couple of months to go with his calf because it was quite a nasty one. But look, I think he's tough and he's resilient, and he's one of the only traditional finger spinners I've seen in my life that actually gets some significant revolutions on the ball. So, he's very, very special, and he'll be a very tough act to follow.
I mean, we saw that in the Ashes, his injury.
Yeah.
You can make a case change the whole series.
You could. Yeah.
Now, the coach, Andrew McDonald.
Yeah.
All right, now I'll run my agenda past you, Stu.
Okay, you go first.
And then you can tell me what you think.
Yeah.
T20 World Cup last year, we weren't prepared. We go into the opening game, lose by 100 runs, shoots our net run rate. I put a lot of the blame on the coach for that. I think you've got to be aware of the tournament and say to your players, whatever happens, we can't lose by 100 runs in our first game.
Yeah.
Get close. That's them. We go to India, we drop head. Tactically, we're all over the shop. Takes us a couple of test matches to get our act together. Fine, we played well in the second half, but it's a bit late when you're 2-0 down. And then the Ashes, I feel like after 2 test matches, McDonald and Cummins got exposed because they just went, we're 2-0 up, let's just hold the line. And as soon as you do that, you open the door to be walked all over. Thoughts?
There is clearly a case for the coach being given the door right now before these 2 tournaments, to be honest, because as you said, tactics have been an issue. Now, a lot of heat was put on Pat Cummins during the Ashes because of the tactics. Our tactics were absolutely just terrible. I can't. They were awful and bad and ill-disciplined and all over the place. It proved that we didn't prepare for games, and that has to go to the changing room. The guy on the field is really, and this has been the case for quite some time, probably since Steve Waugh. Stephen was making decisions and tactical moves, and he reacted very quickly. I'd say probably from then, including Rick, a lot of the time, I would say that Rick, unfortunately for me, was incredibly tactically aware, but all of the decisions that he made on the field had been made in the changing rooms. And I just think that you need to be on your feet a little bit more in that. He'd be a much better captain now than he was when he was playing.
Definitely.
I think that you can't blame a Pat Cummins or a captain for the decisions that we've been making on the field, but I think you can blame Andrew McDonald. I just think that he lacks imagination and I guess force. You know, he's not saying this and this is not good enough. I think it's a knee jerk from Justin Langer. You know, whereas Justin would have told him what he wants and what he expects, even if he's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, they've just gone completely the other way now. You can't just blame Andrew McDonald, though, either. If you looked into the changing rooms on the Ashes tour, there were a lot of people in those changing rooms. And there were a lot of people with a lot of international experience too. And I won't mention all their names, but there were a lot of support staff and they weren't giving support to the players. I was a little bit surprised that a couple of them weren't saying a little bit more, to be honest. But, you know, I think that tactically we've been poor, you know, as you said, for 12 months. So I think you're probably right.
And I do hold some unpleasant feelings about what happened with Justin Langer because I think it's a bad precedent when you let the players decide who they want to coach, because you don't always have to like your coach.
Look, I do too. I do too. Well, and neither should you. I mean, you're not going to be, you'll be friends afterwards. But you know, but the one thing that I will say is that people now seem to think that you get a job for life. And I think Justin's error was not taking the job. You know, get offered a contract, even though it's not for the length of time that you want it. I never got any more than a year contract when I was playing Test cricket or first class cricket. And you never get picked. I rarely got picked for more than one test. Okay, I may have had a contract, but I only get picked for one test at a time. You pick me for that test, I do the best job I can do. I guarantee I'll get a second one. And Justin probably had an opportunity to prove to them that he was the best guy for the job. You know,
yeah,
I think I agree that players shouldn't be, you know, that's, you know, dog wagging, you know, tail wagging dog sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But Justin may have made the tactical error there too, I think.
And this is something I want to touch on with the captaincy, and also where I sort of feel that one of the great traditions of Australian cricket is the shared knowledge that is passed down the generations. It's usually in dressing rooms or at the pub or after games. That you know, I was really lucky to do a lot of coaching when I was young, and it was the late Brian Tabor and Norm O'Neill and Dougie Walters, and sit in lunch and they tell you about the game and you learn from them.
Yeah.
And you learn the lessons from them. And I feel that this current generation, part of their problem is they feel like they know everything. And I sort of think the selectors a bit of this too in Cricket Australia. For example, I feel that Tim Payne and Pat Cummins, both good blokes, and that's why they've been picked as captains. Not really picked for their tactical acumen or anything else, but they're nice blokes. They can run a good press conference. But in the history of Australian cricket, I always taught, don't pick your wicketkeeper. He's got to concentrate all day on catching the ball. Don't pick your fast bowler. He's got to bowl 20, 25 overs a day and really give it to the opposition. Pick a batter who's standing at slip all day.
Look, I don't believe either of those things. You know,
good.
I think you can pick a wicketkeeper, you can pick a fast bowler, you can pick a spin bowler. The reason I think that wicket keepers were traditionally vice captain is because they see the play from a very specific point of view. They can't move around. They're in one spot, but they see most of what's happening. So they're quite a good tactical support crew. I think the reason that Tim was made captain was for a very specific purpose, I think he was very good. He you know, he finished pretty strong as far as I'm concerned. Pat was the best player in the team. You know, I think it's probably about right.
I just think it's hard for them. I mean, you look at Payne.
We lost captaincy's to India twice. Captaincy's not easy. You know, it wasn't easy for Alan Border either. You know, but he became a good captain for us too, and our greatest ever player at the time. I think you'll see that, you know, and even you look at Pat Cummins in this Ashes tour. He carried a lot of the weight of this tour, and he's done quite well.
I mean, he bowled in the last Test match when we should have batted. I mean, that's a huge mistake.
But as I said, I'm not blaming that on him. I guarantee you that those Muppets in the changing rooms had decided we got to bowl.
But don't you think you want to? And they probably saw the Surrey results and thought, Surrey win batting second.
Some idiot on a computer has decided to bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, ask Ian Chappell what he thinks about that.
But I just think we're asking a lot of Cummins, right? We asked a lot of Payne, and I do think it affects our results.
You're asking a lot of every captain.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who they are.
I'd just rather ask someone that doesn't have to bowl.
Someone who's shit.
Well, no, but like maybe not a Smith, but a Head maybe, or a Khawaja.
Mate, you can do Usman might be a good selection, but who knows how long any of these guys are going to be around. I think Pat's done a good job. He's been prepared to carry a lot of the burden on his shoulders. And I say let's sort of stick with him and be strong.
There's been a bit of that. There's been I have noticed that
he's tough, man.
Quite a few, and he's great guy, fantastic bowler.
No. You keep going on about the great guy thing. Look at his face on the field. He's not hugging everybody on the field. Everybody talks about Pat Cummins being woke. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure, he might be. But on the field, you do not want to be facing Pat Cummins. He's the hitman in that bowling attack. He's not thinking about giving people a hug. Yeah. This guy is tough, and his workload in this series is tough. Yeah. He's done it.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a massive heart. I agree with you, he's tough. I just think we're overburdening him. And he's bowling. I mean,
that's probably why you're sitting there, Menas.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. And he's taken 200 and something Test wickets.
He's got a lot more to come,
but I think he averaged 37 per wicket in that series. So
there's nothing wrong with that either.
30. Well,
there's nothing wrong with 37, mate.
What was your Test average with the ball?
30.
Yeah, amazing. And last question before we reminisce.
But to get to 30, it means I've had a couple of 57s.
Couple of big days. With the Sheffield Shield, last one before I want to get into your career a little bit. I have a real concern that I think the Sheffield Shield's in real trouble. And I think it's still a good competition, and it's a great sort of breeding ground for young cricketers. But I think it's slowly losing what made it such a great competition, because a lot of players now aren't even there. They're playing in T20 comps, and it's sort of like a development league. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I know that this is a big thing for Greg Chappell. Greg Chappell still to this day wants to make it a junior competition. He says that it's all about Test cricket. For me, that it all starts with these junior development squads. I don't have a lot of time for them, if I'm honest. I think that grade cricket, leading into Shield cricket, leading into Test cricket, I think that's the way it goes. I never really believed in the Cricket Academy, even though I went there. I think that it's far better for kids of 17 to 22 to spend time at home with their families and getting an education and working in with their mates week in, week out. If you've been in the state squad for 4 or 5 years, like I was in Perth, and it doesn't work out, you always have the opportunity to move on. There are more opportunities now because you can move to another state for T20 competition and stay for the Shield competitions. So you've got opportunities to dip your toes in other ponds. I think that Sheffield Shield cricket has a huge role to play, but it should be the next best thing to Test cricket. It shouldn't be just a testing ground for kids that are 17 who have, done well in the Australian Under-17s Championship. I think that's rubbish. I want to see a 17-year-old playing against me, and see how far he gets. Some old crusty guys who have been playing, Shield cricket for 15 years. That's what you want. You want to see them playing Greg Matthews. They would be eaten alive.
Yeah.
And then if they make it through that, then they're going to be ready for Test cricket.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the veterans aren't sticking around in Shield cricket.
They're not sticking around because they're being pissed off.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not being given the opportunity to stick around. because state selectors are being told what to do by Cricket Australia. And, Greg, there's a lot of good aspects to Greg Chappell, but his attitude towards development cricket in Australia has caused huge problems, I think.
Interesting. And one other concern with the Shield is that it's what you said about the development teams, that it seems like if you get in the pathways early, you sort of taken through. And there are other cricketers sweating their ass off in the country in grade cricket, churning out the runs, and they don't get a look in because they never quite got brought into the system. And then we have a situation last summer where New South Wales doesn't win a game.
And rightly so. That's, that things have been shaken up accordingly. But, I think that you should be rewarded for hard work. If you get, 1,000 runs in grade cricket, you take 50 wickets, you should be banging the living daylights out of the door. If you make 300s in first grade cricket, that's a pretty good start. I think that's what needs to start happening. And if we pick the guys that have taken the most wickets, or at least give them a chance. So if a guy's taken a couple of fivers in a row, give them a go. If somebody's missed out a couple of games in a row,
they're gone.
Pump them, You don't pick people on potential. You pick people on actual results.
At that level, especially.
Well, at each level. At each level.
And then I guess...
When I used to get dropped from the Australian Test team...
Yep.
And they would always say, because there were spin bowlers coming out, from the day I started playing for Australia to the day I finished, I think there were 13 spin bowlers got picked for Australia.
Yep.
Wasn't just Shane and I. They were always trying to find somebody else.
Colin Miller, Peter McIntyre.
There were a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of young blokes too. But what I always said to myself was, I'm going to go back to Shield cricket or back to grade cricket, and I'm going to take the most wickets. So you have to pick me. And that's the way it goes, because then you know that the guy you're going to... Because it's a form thing too. If I'm taking wickets, I want to be picked when I am taking wickets. I don't want to be picked when I haven't made a run for ages or haven't taken a wicket for ages, because then I'm going to be going in feeling nervous. You've got to be at your peak,
So I have real concerns with the Sheffield Shield, that plus the rise of T20 competitions. The more and more players will just use the Shield and the development as let's build up my CV, and then off you go around the world playing in T20 comps. And I'm worried. I've got to say I'm worried. I love the Shield, but I just hope it doesn't continually get eroded by outside forces.
I think Victoria's dumped all of their development stuff. So now it's going to be grade cricket. So let's see them. I think they'll lead the way.
Good. Positive note to end. All right, that was all the news with Stuart MacGill, host of Wickets. Now, I want to just reminisce, Stu, on your career, because one of the great things about KO is they have all the Ashes just on there, all the Ashes highlights. And I started off last night going through the 98-99 summer.
Right.
Australia, I think, beat England 3-1 in the Ashes at home, a brilliant series.
3-1, yeah.
And I mentioned at the top of the show, you took 12 wickets in the final match.
Yeah.
That was, I think, the summer where Shane was out for most of it with a shoulder injury.
Yeah, Shane had been injured. We went to India at the beginning of 98, and it was a shoulder or finger injury. And then we went to Pakistan. And
did you go on that tour to India in 98?
I was on the tour.
And they played Robinson and
Gav Robertson played
Warney.
instead of me, yeah. But then Warney went out. I came in for Pakistan at the end of 98.
Yeah.
And did quite well there, and then went into the Australian summer as the number one spin bowler.
That was a tour of Pakistan where Tubby scored 300.
334, yep.
What a miracle.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was an amazing innings, but he should have batted on.
Broken the record?
Oh, it was just more that pitch was going to be a one innings pitch for me.
Yeah.
We should have made 1,000.
He could have made 400, old Tubby.
Oh, would have, yeah.
When I was watching the 98-99 highlights, I noticed Warney was commentating and you were playing. What was that like for you?
I had no idea. I mean, I wasn't really interested about who was in the commentary box. And the thing for me is I never really cared who else was in the team either. You just got to do what you can do to contribute. As a bowler, you've got to contribute to those 20 wickets. And that's all I tried to do, try to take as many of them as I could, take the pressure off the batsman.
I mean, a brilliant series to play. And as I said, an amazing Australian win, 12 wickets in the last game. But then at the MCG Boxing Day Test, I love this. You smashing 43 to get Tugger to 100.
Yeah.
I won't talk about the second innings where Australia collapsed and lost. But
yeah, well, we should have won that game. We definitely threw that away.
Chasing 175.
We took the extra half an hour we shouldn't have because it was dark.
Yeah.
But having said that, Dean Headley bowled very, very well. And I've watched that series recently myself. And Dean Headley was one that really stuck out for me. He doesn't get talked about much, and lots of people won't know him. But do yourself a favour and watch him. He bowled very, very well.
Great spell.
Very well, yeah.
What's it like when you go back and watch highlights of yourself?
I wasn't really watching myself. It was more to remind myself of other players, because what was happening during the Ashes, this year's Ashes series, it was on the TV a bit, and people were watching, and I didn't really know what they were talking about. So I did go back and watch it. But you say I smashed 43. It was the worst 40 of all time.
I mean, there was a couple of French cuts.
No, there weren't a couple. It was just absolute shit from start to finish.
You're very humble, but I saw you loft a couple over the top for 4. And
it was an accident.
A couple of other things that stood out from that series. How good Slats was at the top of the order. He and Damien Martin had such great techniques. They were just beautiful technicians with the bat.
Well, Slats was one of the first ones I think who genuinely had, the first ones that I noticed who had genuine commitment to each stroke that he was playing, which is what I've sort of said throughout our chat today. I like to see batsmen who see the ball, know where they want to put it, and just commit to it 100%. And there's no doubt that he did. I mean, some people say he threw the kitchen sink at it,
He did.
But that's the total commitment to the shot that I'm looking for from a batsman. Marto is the best batsman of his generation. There's no doubt about it. Timed the ball, used the toothpick. He could have batted with a stump and made the hundreds that he did, and reinvented himself. Furthermore, he for a kid from WA, batted very, very well in the subcontinent. So, completely different environments, and yet he performed very well there too. I mean, Marto was, as I said, I think he's the best batsman of his generation. He was amazing.
A beautiful technique. And unfortunately, he was the scapegoat of that loss at the Sydney Cricket Ground against South Africa in 94.
Yeah.
I was at that game, and he was very young. He might have been only 20, 21 when he was picked. And, he was in the wilderness for a long time. And, but Slats made 100 maybe in that series I was talking about at the SCG.
Yeah, he made 100 at the SCG.
120 odd off about 180.
Yeah.
And just incredible. Unfortunately, he's not doing so well at the moment, so I hope he
That's right.
does
Everybody
a bit better.
hopes that he gets better.
Yeah. A couple of other things from that series jumped out at me. How good a skipper Mark Taylor was to spin bowlers. What was your experience?
He certainly, for me, at that stage of my career, was perfect for me because he just sort of, I guess, held my hand through it all. And looked after me. I think he sort of realised that my role was quite important, but didn't burden me with that. Later on in my career, I preferred the captaincy style of Steve Waugh, just because Steve, you always knew that he believed in you. If you believed in yourself, he'd back you 100%. And I think, he was great for that stage of my career. I think, if I'd had pressure put on me at the beginning of my career, maybe I would have fallen apart. I always sort of say Mark Taylor was kind of like, a kindly headmaster, carried you through things, There's whereas Steve would, slap me on the shoulder and say, right, let's go, man. Like, do what you do. And it was pretty cool. I liked that. But, yeah, the great thing, I mean, Mark, was great in first slip too, which is very important for me when I was bowling.
Yeah, and that's consistent. I hear about Steve Waugh. A lot of ex-players say he just used to back them.
Yeah.
Damien Fleming.
Yeah.
Just back yourself.
Yeah.
And what a great message to have that in your ear the whole time. I don't know though if he valued spin as much as Taylor did.
Well, I would totally disagree
Good,
with that.
because you
Yeah.
know more than me.
Yeah, well, and I got most of my wickets when I was playing with him.
Okay.
So, he definitely valued me, and I bowled spin.
Okay, there you go. Well, because one thing when I look back at these highlights, and that SCG game, Australia played 3 spinners: you, Funky Miller, and Warney.
Yeah, that was just really because Funky was bowling seamers as well, so he opened the bowling.
Yeah.
But we had some injuries too, and Shane wanted to come. They wanted Shane to come back because they were hoping that he played in the one-day series following it, which he did. So that was maybe a time and a place.
But I also think generally Australia seemed to value spin more in the 90s. Is that dropping wickets? Because that's what I think. My theory is once they went to dropping wickets...
No, I think you're drawing a long bow there, because dropping wickets are better for a wrist spin bowler,
Yeah, right.
than they are for just a nothing seamer.
Right.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. Tennis ball bounce for seamers, which means that you can't bowl fast and scary as easily. That's why you see a guy like Boland who bowls fuller is better on a drop-in wicket than he is on just a hard flat wicket.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the drop-in wickets shouldn't really affect what good bowlers do.
Yeah.
So
do you think it's a talent thing? Because
that's a talent thing.
Interesting, because Australia hasn't looked to play. They wouldn't look to play 2 spinners at home.
Pick them, find them.
Yeah.
That's my argument there. They're just not around.
I mean, it's so hard to bowl leg spin. There's that great quote from Terry Jenner, Warney's old coach, that there'll be millions of people bowling leg spin after this, but I don't know if we'll see any.
Well,
for
none
Australia
of them came through
because it's so difficult.
No, it's because TJ was coach.
I mean, that was one other thing as well is pre-DRS.
Yeah.
So if you're a spinner,
Yeah.
players just get on the front foot and pat it away,
God.
even if it's going straight on to hit middle stump.
Yeah.
And the umpires don't even consider it because back then, his foot's down the wicket, too much down.
I would have got a lot more wickets. What my problem was that because my stock ball turned so much, when I bowled a straight one, they'd go, it's missing off. Okay, it was straight. No, and because they just haven't picked it up. I mean, I would have cleaned up. I've probably told you this before. I was playing against Bangladesh in Cairns, and I'd got 2 wickets in a row. Then I bowled the straight thing, hit the batsman on the full in front of middle. Would have been a hat trick in Test cricket. Rudy Kurtzen was the umpire, a great bloke, and not out. And then afterwards, he'd seen it on the replay and just came into the change room straight away and said, "Man, I don't know what I was looking at. I'm really sorry." Well, DRS would have fixed that for me. That was out.
I saw one. I think it was the last ball of the day, and I think it was you bowling. The guy just patted forward, middle of the pad, in front of middle stump, and everyone just walked away.
Yeah.
Like now they'd be doing, doing the sign to
Absolutely.
So I reckon, with with DRS, you probably have another 50 Test wickets.
Let's give me that. That'll be fine. Yeah, 250 is fine for me.
Yeah, we'll rewrite the record books. And last one, I was looking through some scorecards, and I'm actually looking at the World 11 game.
Oh, yeah.
Because this was a fascinating game. End of 2005. So organised because no one could beat Australia. And then Australia lost the Ashes in England in 2005. And you came up against Smith, Sehwag, Dravid, Lara, Callis, Al-Haq, Flintoff, Mark Butcher. That's the batting. And you just walked away with a lazy 4 for 39 and 5 for 43. Australia spanked the World 11 by 210 runs.
A lot of people give that game a hard time.
Yeah,
it's absolutely rubbish to suggest that those batsmen didn't care.
Of course they care.
They're all egomaniacs. Inzamam Al-Haq, for example, John Buchanan, who terrible coach, came up to me before.
Sorry, what terrible coach?
Terrible coach. Came up to me before the Test match and said, "Right now, Inzamam Al-Haq, he's never been out-stumped in his career. How are you going to bowl to him?" And I just looked. I actually looked at him, sneered, and walked off, and then got him out-stumped. So there's a picture of me running towards the changing rooms.
Yeah,
and I'm running straight at John Buchanan. He's been out-stumped now yet.
What was your issue with John Buchanan?
He's crap.
Really?
Stole a living.
It stole a living.
Yeah.
Interesting. You and Warnie then agreed on that one.
Totally in total agreement.
I got to ask, Shane, passed away just over a year ago. You played so much cricket together and were sort of linked by being at the same era. How does sort of you feel when he passed away?
No, it was terrible. I still don't quite. I mean, you could argue sort of lifestyle, catches up with all of us, but it certainly shook me up a lot, and you get used to somebody being around all the time. It was just always in the back for me, and I just think it's just a terrible shame that he's not still floating around, and yeah, that was very upsetting, and I felt very badly for his family too, because he's such a big personality. It's impossible to fill that hole in a room.
Yeah, and you've spoken before, but you guys had quite a good relationship.
Yeah, we got on fine.
Two people that were
we
competing.
got on fine. His mum and dad and my mum and dad are good mates, and I'd still speak to Keith every now and then. Send a text message, and so yeah, I just it's just a massive shame.
It is a massive shame. Well, Stu, I reckon we'll wrap it up. It's been so great to have you on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Two things I want to say to you.
Yes.
First thing was, watching those highlights, it was such a pleasure to watch you play. I mean, I know it's been said a lot, but, you were such a fantastic bowler.
I was good for spectators, either runs or wickets.
Well,
it was great.
Sangakkara said it, not me, but, if it wasn't for Shane Warne, how many knows how many hundreds of test wickets you could have taken. So, I think I was so privileged to watch your career. And also, so privileged to have you on the podcast to talk to you now.
My pleasure, mate.
You're so open and honest. So, I tell all listeners, go and subscribe to Wickets. I'll put the link in the episode notes so you can hear Stewie's stuff. He's also on Twitter. And, I'd love to hear more about you, hear more of you talking cricket because it's fascinating.
We'll see how we go. Thank you very much, Menas. You're a pleasure to talk to.
Thanks, Stu, and thanks to all the listeners. We'll be back soon. Great stuff.
Groovy. Thank you.